They taught me how to kill before I even knew what love was. When most boys were learning how to flirt, how to ride bikes, or how to kick a ball with their friends, I was learning how to make someone disappear without leaving a trace. I was 13 when I held my first real knife, not in a kitchen, not for cooking, but in a silent, windowless room, where the lights never flickered and the screams were never heard outside. They told me I was chosen, gifted, that I would make the supreme leader proud. At night, I used to dream of oceans I'd never seen, and cities I could barely pronounce. Seoul, Bangkok, Sydney, and every morning, I'd wake up in a uniform with no name, no past, and a future that didn't belong to me. The mission they gave me was simple: infiltrate, observe, eliminate if necessary. I was almost ready, but I ran. Before my first kill. Before I became someone I couldn't forgive. And now, I am the only one who knows what they're truly training, and what happens when one of their own escapes. My name isn't Ji-hoon, but that's what I go by now. I was born in Pyongyang, in the heart of the regime, in a neighborhood where every apartment had electricity, and every family had a portrait of the supreme leader above their television. My father worked for the Ministry of State Security. I never knew exactly what he did, but he wore a uniform that made neighbors bow, and he came home with eyes that had seen things no child should ever ask about. From the outside, we looked like the ideal North Korean family. My mother stayed home, always careful not to speak too loudly. I attended a prestigious state-run school reserved for children of the loyal elite. We were taught mathematics and science, of course, but also the poetry of Kim Il-sung, the betrayals of the South, and the glory of the Workers' Party. I memorized every line like scripture, afraid to get even one word wrong. I believed it all, at least at first. I used to wear my school uniform with pride, a red neckerchief around my throat, like a badge of honor. I sang revolutionary songs with more passion than the rest, and when I recited party slogans, teachers patted me on the back and said I was destined for special service. Then one day, my name was called after class. 3 men, in black coats, stood waiting. They didn't smile. They didn't explain. My teacher only said, "You've been chosen." That night, I didn't go home. I never saw my parents again. They told me this was a great honor, that my family would be rewarded for my service, that I was to become part of a secret training academy, a place that didn't officially exist, where boys like me were prepared to serve the homeland in ways others could never imagine. At 13, I still thought loyalty was everything. I didn't know yet that in the world I was entering, loyalty could get you killed just as easily as betrayal. And in that world, emotions were weaknesses, trust was dangerous, and the only thing more important than survival was silence. The academy had no name, at least not one, they told us. Just coordinates etched onto the side of a military truck, and whispered orders in the dead of night. It was hidden in the mountains, surrounded by concrete walls, topped with rusted wire. From the outside, it looked like an abandoned research facility. Inside, it was a machine designed not to teach, but to break, mold, and remanufacture boys into shadows. We woke at 4:30 a.m. sharp to a buzzer that never malfunctioned. The floors were always cold, the food always bland, and the faces around me always hollow. Every moment was scheduled, timed, and ranked. Failure meant punishment. Too much success meant isolation. No one explained the rules. You just learned fast or disappeared. The first 6 months were mostly physical. Running in snow with bare feet, blindfolded drills, sleep deprivation, hand-to-hand combat. They called it preconditioning. We weren't told what we were being prepared for, but they watched us, constantly studying. Who showed fear? Who hesitated? Who cried at night? I stopped crying after the second week. The boy in the next bunk did not. He was gone by morning. Eventually, the lessons shifted. They taught us how to forge passports, how to impersonate South Korean dialects, how to kill a man in under 10 seconds using just a pencil or a shoelace. There were entire classes on deception, how to mirror body language, how to fake grief, how to lie so convincingly even your heartbeat agreed with you. But what haunted me most were the psychological drills. They'd take your deepest memory, your mother's voice, the smell of your favorite food, the laugh of a younger sibling, and override it with commands. They wanted to erase who we were, so we could become what they needed. I remember once, during a trust exercise, we were forced to stand in a circle. Each boy had to slap the one next to him across the face. Not once, not twice, but until told to stop. Some cried, some laughed, some hesitated. I became very good at not hesitating. For a time, I believed that was strength. There was a boy named Min Sok, sharp, quiet, faster than anyone else. He told me once, in a whisper we weren't allowed to share. They'll make us into ghosts, but ghosts can't feel guilt. Then he bit down on a capsule hidden in his tooth and collapsed in front of me. We were 14. No one spoke his name again. That night, I lay in bed wondering if that would be me one day. And worse, if I would even care. It wasn't a gunshot or a scream that broke me. It was a whisper. We had just finished a week-long simulation in the forest. 3 boys assigned to infiltrate a rural village, gather intelligence, and return undetected. We were cold, filthy, and half-starved. Our reward was an early dinner and a night without drills. But the next morning, our instructor summoned me alone. The interrogation room was small, windowless, and far too clean. At the center was a man tied to a chair. His head drooped forward, blood crusting his cheek. He looked middle-aged, maybe early 40s. Civilian clothes, hands trembling. He didn't scream. He didn't speak. A file was placed in front of me. This man, the instructor said, is a defector, caught trying to cross the Yalu River. Your task is to neutralize him. Do it efficiently. Do it quietly. I stood there, frozen. I was 16. I'd trained for this moment for years. I had choked out dummies, stabbed practice torsos, memorized techniques for silent kills. But this was real. He was real. I looked into his face. His eyes met mine, not begging, not defiant, just tired. There was something disturbingly familiar about his gaze. It reminded me of my father's part, the way he stared at the floor on days when he thought no one was watching. Heavy, haunted. My hand trembled as I reached for the garrote wire they'd laid out for me. And then he spoke, barely audible, lips cracked, but clear enough. You still have a choice. They haven't taken that yet. It was one sentence. A sentence they never prepared us for. I looked back at the instructor. He raised an eyebrow, just slightly, like he was curious what I would do. Like this was part of the test. I didn't move. Seconds passed. Then the instructor nodded to another boy, Yong-ho, one of the more advanced trainees. Without hesitation, Yong-ho stepped forward and completed the task. Clean, mechanical, emotionless. I didn't flinch. But inside, something fractured. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling for hours, his words replaying in my head. You still have a choice. Was that true? Or was it just a lie meant to make his death mean something? The following week, I received my first real mission assignment. It was to take place across the border, a trial run. If I succeeded, I'd be deployed abroad within months. They handed me a forged South Korean ID, a burner phone, and a vial of unmarked pills just in case things went wrong. I was told my family had been rewarded for my progress. I asked to write them a letter. The instructor laughed. That's not part of the program. That was it. My line. If I followed this path any further, I would disappear into it. Become what they made me to be. And I knew, even if I lived another 50 years, I would never be able to recognize the boy I used to be. The choice wasn't between success and failure. It was between obedience and humanity. And so, I made my plan. I waited 3 weeks, not out of fear, but precision. I needed to time everything: movements, shadows, gaps in patrol schedules. I studied the guards, memorized their routes. I feigned compliance, recited propaganda, and smiled when they told me I was ready for greatness. I played the ghost they trained me to be. But beneath it all, I was building my own script, one not written by them. The opportunity came during a scheduled field training exercise near the northern border close to the Yalu River. We were to be deployed in teams of 2, simulating covert river crossing procedures under surveillance. I volunteered for the late-night slot, the one with the fewest eyes. I stole 3 things in the days before: a laminated border map from the instructor's drawer, a utility blade from the maintenance room, and a small stash of glucose tablets from the infirmary. That was all I could manage without suspicion. I wore an extra layer of clothing beneath my uniform. I wrapped plastic around my feet to muffle my steps. The night air was cold mid-autumn in the mountains, but not freezing yet. I counted down in my head. At 1:43 a.m., my partner was instructed to survey a perimeter zone, 100 meters south of our current position. As soon as he disappeared into the fog, I ran. Not fast. Fast draws attention. I moved like I was still part of a drill. I ducked beneath a rusted section of fence we'd crossed a dozen times in practice. But this time, I kept going. Past the line. Past the edge of the simulation zone. The river wasn't far, but it felt endless in the dark. My breath came in clouds, my legs aching from fear more than exertion. When I reached the banks of the Yalu, I didn't hesitate. I couldn't. Every second meant the difference between freedom and a bullet. The water was black and fast. I tied my stolen blade to my wrist with string and stuffed the glucose tablets into my sock. Then I slipped in. The cold hit like a scream, teeth chattering, lungs burning, muscles locking. I forced myself to keep moving. One stroke, then another. My limbs moved on instinct, not will. Halfway through, I heard a sound: distant shouts, flashlights scanning. They'd noticed. I ducked beneath the surface, heart thudding like a war drum. The current pulled me, but I kept kicking. I didn't care where I landed. China, a rock, hell, as long as it wasn't back there. When I finally pulled myself onto the opposite shore, I collapsed behind a row of wet reeds, coughing, gasping, shivering. My fingers were blue. My lungs felt shredded. But I was alive. It wasn't over. It was barely beginning. For 2 days, I moved through the outskirts of Chinese villages, avoiding main roads, stealing bread from unattended carts, sleeping in drainage ditches. I didn't speak. I didn't look anyone in the eye. I pretended I didn't exist. On the 3rd night, a man approached me behind a market in Dandong. He was Korean Chinese, his accent marked him. He asked where I came from. I lied. He didn't believe me. But he didn't press. He offered food and shelter for the night. I didn't trust him, but I didn't have a choice. He introduced me to someone the next day. A woman who helped lost boys, she said. People like me. She didn't ask for my name, just if I wanted out. I nodded. That was the start of another journey, longer, stranger, quieter. Over the next month, I was moved through a series of safe houses across China. I kept my head down, obeyed every instruction, never touched a phone or window. I lived like a ghost. In Kunming, I was smuggled across the border into Laos by night, crammed into the trunk of a van with 4 others. One girl, no older than 12, cried until she passed out. No one said a word. In Laos, we were detained by local police. For a moment, I thought it was over, that someone had informed, that I'd be sent back. But after 3 days, we were released to a South Korean embassy official. I remember his face wrinkled, calm, tired. He offered me water. It was the first time in years that someone looked at me and didn't expect me to prove my loyalty. From there, the final leg was a flight. A real plane. I sat by the window. As we lifted off, I stared out at the clouds and whispered a name I hadn't spoken in years, my real one. No one heard me, but for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost. Landing in Seoul felt less like arriving in a new country and more like stepping onto another planet. The moment I exited the airport, I froze. Everything was too loud, too fast, too bright. Cars that didn't look like military trucks, people walking freely, laughing into phones. Billboards the size of buildings. Women in jeans. Men with dyed hair. No portraits of leaders. No slogans. No one watching me, at least not visibly. I was taken to Hanawon, the government-run resettlement center for defectors. There, for the first time in my life, I was told, "You are safe. You are free." But I didn't feel free. I felt unanchored. Each room at Hanawon had a bed, a desk, and a light switch I could control myself. I turned it on and off a dozen times the first night. Just because I could. They gave us smartphones. I held mine like it was a weapon. It buzzed. It glowed. It connected to something called Google, and YouTube, and news from everywhere. I searched for images of Pyongyang, curious to see what the world believed it looked like. I saw glossy photos, clean streets, smiling children, fireworks displays. I almost laughed. Then I almost cried. They taught us how to open a bank account, how to use public transport, how to apply for a job. They even taught us how to shop, how to choose between 5 kinds of toothpaste instead of using the single rationed one I'd known all my life. But the hardest part wasn't adapting to the world outside. It was confronting the world inside me. I couldn't sleep well. Every sudden noise felt like a threat. I still folded my clothes with military precision. I still memorized exit points whenever I entered a room. I still found myself walking in shadows, avoiding eye contact, preparing for interrogation that never came. Worse than the fear was the emptiness. No family to call, no friends to laugh with, and no identity that truly belonged to me. I wasn't a citizen. I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't even sure I was a person. During one counseling session, I told the therapist, "I escaped North Korea, but I don't know if I've escaped what they made me into." She didn't offer a cliché. She just nodded and said, "That will take time. But the fact that you're asking that question means you're already further than you think." At Hanawon, I met others like me, older, younger, male, female. Some who had been tortured, some who had lost their families, some who had survived by betraying others. No one judged. We all carried ghosts, some heavier than others. The strangest part? Freedom felt lonelier than captivity, but it also felt real. Every time I walked outside and no one followed me. Every time I spoke and didn't worry who was listening. Every time I made a choice and no one corrected it. A piece of me returned. Not the same boy they tried to erase, but someone new. Someone becoming. I've been in South Korea for 5 years now. People ask me what I do, and I usually say, I work in IT, which is true. I fix broken systems hardware, code, forgotten passwords. But no one knows I'm still fixing myself. I live alone, in a small apartment where I control the lights, the heat, the locks. That simple control still feels like a miracle. I buy groceries, I cook, I eat, I sleep. Some nights I dream in uniform. Some nights in silence. I haven't told anyone the full story, not even the therapist I still see once a month. Not because I'm ashamed, but because I'm afraid it might not feel real to them. Because it still barely feels real to me. There are moments on crowded trains, in coffee shops, under neon lights, where I feel almost normal. Then, A voice on the news mentions the North, and I freeze. I wonder if they're still looking for me. If my name still exists on a file somewhere, with red ink marked defected. I think about my parents. I don't know if they were punished. If they're alive. I don't know if they ever got the letter I wrote but never sent. And I think about the boy I used to be. The one who was trained to lie. To kill. To disappear. Sometimes, I miss him. Not because I want to be him again, but because he survived what he never should have had to face. And he chose not to become what they designed him to be. That choice, that one moment, is the only reason I'm here. So, if you're watching this, whether you're in Seoul, or Tokyo, or New York, or somewhere deep in the shadows of the regime, this is what I want you to know. You are not your programming. You are not the uniform they give you. You are not the silence they force upon you. There is always a crack in the wall. A gap in the guard's routine. A breath between orders. And in that space, you can choose. You can run. You can survive. You can begin again.